Hi, my name is Myrzah Bello. I'm VP Sustainable Development and Human Resources at O3 Mining. So O3 Mining is a gold exploration and development company, and I am responsible for making sure that we develop all our projects responsibly and that we develop our future mine also responsibly to get that social acceptability that is so important these day and ages to advance mining projects.
Myrzah, well, thank you very much for coming on the show. I really appreciate that. We are going to talk today about ESG and trying to understand it a little bit more. I think lots of people have different views on what it means, and certainly some of the companies I've spoken to have different views of what it means. But can we just start with a little bit about you? What's your background in this? Are you new to this?
No, actually, I'm not new. I'm not new at all. I've been working actually on climate change for over 20 years now. I was before joining O3, I was a consultant actually to help different industrial facilities with different environmental issues, including climate change. And I also actually teach greenhouse gas and climate change in university here in Quebec.
Okay, definitely not new to this then. Well, it's interesting. And the only reason I ask, I'm being a little bit cheeky, but I see people coming on the show and talking about it, and they've never done it before, and they've got different definitions about it, what it means, and therefore you can understand why there's some skepticism amongst investors, investing community about it, and even some of the fund managers I talk to, they're not quite sure why they're doing it either. But so thank you for that. Look, let's talk about O3 Mining and how it is addressing the issue. Clearly, institutionals are talking again, right? They're kind of not investing in coal. They're not investing in fossil fuels more broadly, and they're taking a much stricter approach as to the criteria by which they do invest, and that's important to you as a company, right? And right, I think that's important to say.
It is. No, it is important because in 2022 or in the next few years, and when we're getting to a net zero world, we have to learn how we have to do things right. It doesn't mean that we have to stop producing because we still need the products, we still need the metals, but how could we do it better, right? And I think that's where investors should be thinking about, are companies doing it better? Are we not leaving a passive to the future generations, right? How are we doing things to make sure that we're developing these projects and not leaving negatives to other parts of society, right? How can we move along everyone together?
Right. Okay. So in that sense, there's a lot of kind of stakeholders, right? Because it's not just your shareholders, who care how you do it or should care how you do it. But you're also having to deal with this sort of, kind of social media environment where activists and anti-mining groups, NGOs sit, and they're looking in. I was part of ICE was there as part of the Extinction Rebellion crowd in Regent Street in London on Saturday. They were not happy about mining. They're not happy about fossil fuels, and they think that you guys are, damaging the world, the planet for the next generation. So that's a big accusation. That's a very emotive topic. So what do you do about it?
So really, the way I see it is in every topic there's extremes, right? So there's the companies or the projects that didn't care about anything and just went to get the profits without necessarily looking at the consequences or the impacts. And then we have the other side, which is the activists, where we have to stop everything in the world and live off of air, I guess, because really just to burn wood in your house to get some warmth, you're still creating emissions. But, so I find that the activists, especially, like in the 90s or in early 20s, to 2000s, were there really to create that balance because no one's taking care of it. Okay. So I think that's why we have these extremes, but I think as a society, we have to reach this middle, right? Not necessarily go to not caring about anything to, okay, we have to stop everything because that's not reality. I think they're there to push, to give food for thought. I think that's their role. And it doesn't mean that maybe they didn't think about other ways of doing this, but it's going to make people make that innovation, that thought process. That's how I see it.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to see it because they have a role to play to kind of hold companies accountable. the good and the bad, and improve standards across the board. So no, actually, like I think it's a good thing. Let me get back to the investor community. I talked about fund managers. I sat down and spoke with several fund managers off camera. They, like I said to you earlier, they too don't quite understand this rush into ESG or necessarily how they measure companies. Like, they seem to have some very arbitrary targets, and they're not all the same. So when you're talking to institutions and they're talking that ESG credentials, how do you help them understand what they need to be looking at, what's important to look at, or do you have to just kind of go with whatever they say and react to it?
Well, it's true that there are so many standards out there that could create so much confusion in especially in investors where they haven't necessarily been following, and following this evolution. But you have the SASB and you have the GRI, and then there's so many standards there that you could get lost. I guess the new Institute on Sustainability that's being created will probably help in providing, a more common standard. So my approach, because of all these standards, I have to apply what applies to my industry, and even more specifically to exploration, right? Because if I'm compared to a mine and an investor is asking me, okay, so how do you manage your tailings? I don't have tailings. I'm not there yet. But if you're comparing me to that, and I don't answer that question, and then you put me an arbitrary score because I don't want to report on it. It has nothing to do with that. It's just I don't have it, right? So I have to apply what is applicable to me. And one of my biggest preoccupations in the ESG reporting that we do and everything that we do is the transparency. Like I'm as transparent. It is what it is. We have so many emissions. We had so many accidents. That's what it is. So I think that transparency bit is really key in this reporting, because all these standards are just going to create a lot of confusion and not necessarily good comparison.
Right.
Now, what did we do in 2021? We went to get a certification, which is called ECOLOGO, which is for exploration, right? I didn't go get a certification that's for a mine or for a refinery, because it has to be applicable to my activities, right? And what does ECOLOGO do? So it really go get the whole 3 ESG, so the environment, the social, and the governance. I would tell you that the S is huge, right? It's 3 letters, but the S in our 5 pillars, the S considers 3, right? It considers our people, so our talent. It considers our community and our First Nations, like the whole community, our residents, and then our health and safety of our workers and the communities. So that S is just 1 letter, but for us, it's 3. I separated in 3 pillars. So what the ECOLOGO did is really make sure that we have all the processes in place where we're taking care of all those 3 ESGs, and it's third-party audited. So it kind of comes and gives us it's not me saying I have all the good protocols, right? A third party, like from UL, came to audit my system and certified, yes, they're taking care of all of these.
So how do I know that ECOLOGO is the kind of best of breed? Because we've seen in the past, these things will happen in cycles, right? We've seen in the past where the ISO standards come in, and it ends up just something that you pay for and you pay lip service to, because there's lots of ways you can measure ESG. There's lots of logos that you can put on your PowerPoint presentation. So what's so good about this one, other than it's specific to exploration of minerals at the moment? How do they hold you to these higher standards? So
we have a document audit that is yearly, where they go see if if all the tracking is there, if all the right, I have to accumulate proof of what I'm doing, right? I can't just say I'm doing it. They come in and verify that I did communicate with First Nations, that I did communicate different. It's not only compliance, it goes a little over compliance, and that's what they come and verify. And they're going to come into the field. They're going to see, am I am I taking care of? So the drills, they have they're diesel powered, so there's certain things that have to be in place to make sure that we're controlling. If there's spills, what are we doing? To make sure we're taking care of that. So the auditor comes and verifies that we are doing what we're saying we're doing.
So you sign up for this? I mean, could you see a point in the future where it's obligatory, it's regulation rather than audit or a self-subscribed audit?
So I'm going to go back to my greenhouse gas experience.
Okay.
So when we first started talking about greenhouse gas inventories, right, reporting our emissions and reporting of these emissions, if they were audited, and then audited was voluntary. Like I go audit my emissions. And with time, as we advance in this, in taking care of climate change, well, if you look here in Quebec, all facilities over 25,000 tons of CO2 emissions equivalent, they have to get audited. It's mandatory. So we did see that evolution, right? It was voluntary, go get voluntary disclosure, voluntary auditing, and then mandatory disclosure and mandatory auditing. Are we going to go there with ESG? I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay, interesting thought. I guess these things take time to evolve and just state. But in the meantime, I suspect there are
this ESG, how can I say, excitement? I don't know if I can say excitement. Is still relatively new.
Well, it's a nascent industry, and I think we're seeing lots of consultants come in and try and take advantage of the situation. That's why I asked you about, what are the better ones, and how do they hold you to higher standards? How do you hold them to higher standards, quite frankly, in a way? And it's just make sure it's not a tick box exercise, right?
But also, just so the ECOLOGO also is for service providers of explorations. So more and more, we tend to pick drillers that have the ECOLOGO because it's much easier for us then, because we have to put requirements on them, right? With regards to ECOLOGO, with regards to health and safety, to environment. And if they're ECOLOGO, then it's much easier for us. So right now, two of the three drilling companies that we're using got certified in the past few months, and one is going through the process. So I guess it's also creating, it's not just the explorations, but our service providers that are also being involved. Yeah.
Right. And I guess in times when there's choice available to you, you're going to go for the ECOLOGO guys first. In times like now, drillers are short on the ground, rigs are short on the ground. Does it matter less? Or do you think that you would? I
would tell you it matters. It's much more important. I would tell you whether we have scarcity or not, because what in the experience we've had in the past year and a half, the ones that were not ECOLOGO would just give us much more work. So it's making us more it's inefficient. We always have to be on top of them. There's more spills, more accidents. You know what I mean? So it just creates more management and more issues to manage, really. I would tell you that it gives us more efficiency.
Right. Okay. But I'm saying you've got reputational issue and brand issues in the sense that what they do or don't do correctly reflects on you. So that's why it matters to you.
Yes, it's reputation, but it's not just reputation. I would tell you my field. So we have field supervisors, we have field people to check drillers, making sure that they're doing the work appropriately and etc. And since we have these companies that are ECOLOGO, everything is more efficient.
Right. And by efficient, you mean it doesn't cost you so much money.
It doesn't cost us so much, and we lose less time.
Right. Okay.
Because if there's a spill, we have to stop the drill. We have to clean up the spill. We have to, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Time is money. Well, let's talk about this, because we've had Jose on the program quite a few times, kind of laying out what the strong fundamentals business, and how they will and will not operate, etc. But he uses this line, right? He uses this line, which I've not heard elsewhere. It's like, you guys, O3 Mining wants to become the best in class gold producer. And I challenged him and said, well, what does that even mean? What does that mean, best in class? How do you judge that? But you're saying one of the ways you can judge this is these are 5 pillars that you mentioned earlier on, was sort of in terms of the governance and ethics, health and safety, the environment, talent and culture, community, etc. That's all part of it. But you use those pillars I was reading a document that you guys produced, your ESG report recently. You used that to guide delivering some of that vision. Is that right?
Of course.
Right.
Of course. We really want. So there's our strategy, and at the base of our strategy is ESG. So we have to build our projects responsibly. If we want that social acceptability, if we want to have that okay, right, the license to operate our mine, we have to show today that we are doing our activities, our exploration activities responsibly. For me, it's very important. So I work on two fronts, right? I work on our current activities, and I work on getting that license to operate, right? So I want to go get those permits and that social acceptability. But one of the ways I'm working on that future is making sure today I'm doing things right.
Okay. So
right?
So what does that mean though? What does that mean in actual day-to-day terms for the business, how it operates, the mentality?
It's top priority. It has to be in our minds every day, every morning. I want everyone to go home safely without being hurt. And again, it's not just our employees, but our contractors. So and you would see that in a mine, it's omnipresent, right? It's always there, that health and safety. In exploration, because normally it's smaller companies, it's not always there, but no, it's there. So that's I would tell you that's criteria number one.
Okay.
Without my people healthy and safe, I don't have a project. Environment. So can I do things better? Could I do that mine? Could I do that exploration with the least amount of impact possible? Will it cost me more to do? Maybe. But I'm still preserving the environment that right now we can't give a price on, right? Whether it be preservation of wetlands or fish habitat. There's no cost to it, as opposed to greenhouse gas now that we put a cost on, so we can easily calculate. But there is a cost to all this, right? It's our biodiversity. It's the future. It's the future of our planet. So are there ways that we can make our project where we could reduce that impact, right? So even in the exploration, we've used this technology in 2021, which is to put mats on the soil. It's wooden mats. And then when we remove it, the vegetation will come back. Did it cost us more? Yes, it did. We're probably doing things more responsibly than we would have done in the past, where we were just scrap the way paths, drill, get out and leave. We planted over 19,000 trees last year. Was it mandatory? No. Do we think it's good to, especially zones that we're not thinking of going back? Well, yes, it's just a way of putting back what we removed. So that's, for me, best in class. So, same thing for our talent. We try to give them opportunities to grow, and really, I think this is a worldwide issue. Lack of professional, lack of workforce, I think, is hitting everyone, and it's hitting us. So how do we do things differently? How do we go and attract people? We have to, and it's not just about salary, right? So we changed our work schedule to give a better work-life balance last year. Like we keep on trying to see how we could attract people to work at O3, because if we want to be best in class, we have to have the best in class also.
Okay. So
and governance is really...
Well, let me just ask you a question on the people side of things, because there's been a kind of prices have gone up across. We've had lots of conversations around inflation and supply chain issues over the last 18 months and so forth. And people are a big part of that, right? Can you get people, are they, switching jobs just to get a, increase in whether it be hourly or weekly or monthly pay in an environment like this, which is very, very competitive, so you can be outbid? Does doing any of, well, I'm trying to think, what's the economic benefit for this? So far I've heard it costs a little bit more to do, right? Are there kind of cost savings in creating an environment like this? Because I remember sort of back in the early 2000s when sort of tech was going nuts and I was in the space. It was like bean bags and massages at work, and you think, well, I'll hold on to my talent that way, but it was very superficial, right? So what do these measures do in terms of retention of staff and getting the best staff working for you? Because that can make a difference in terms of efficiencies and output.
I would tell you that I think it's also a generation thing. The younger generation is more worried about ESG than the older generation. When we rolled out our report last week or the week before, I'm kind of losing track of time. One employee wrote to me and he's like, Myrzah, I'm proud of working at O3. Like, he read the report and he's like, I'm proud. So I think it gives them a sense of proud that we are in an industry that is considered, I don't even like saying it because I don't believe it. I just think it's a reputation that it's not a good, clean industry. I think, because I think we can, and I think we have a very hard time in marketing that we are doing things right as an industry as a whole, the mining industry as a whole. I think we're not ones to go in and broadcast what do we have. If you look at the Mining Association of Canada, they have a whole protocol of sustainable mining, right? That people could go get, like it's an ECOLOGO, but for mining. So for me, I think that the geologists and the mining engineers that really love to work in this space, I think it's going to be easier for them to say, well, I'm in a company that really cares about, making it right. But again, that's my opinion.
Yeah, you might be a bit biased, but no, I appreciate that, because it's I see it in other sectors, but not mining, right? We spend a lot of time and effort attracting a better talent pool, right? And it can cost a little bit of money, but you win in the long run by doing that. But let's go into community, which is the kind of the fourth out of the five verticals that you look at. This is the one that people recognize and see a lot of, because the environment is, EIA report, that's all we care about, because then we can move on to the next stage, or permitting and license, we move on to the next stage. Talent and culture, so what? Everyone's got the same problem, right? And health and safety, of course, you've got to make sure people are safe. But the community bit, people automatically go First Nations. But it's bigger than that, right? And they care about First Nations because First Nations can stop a project dead in its tracks if you're not careful, right? You've got to do that. But you've got a bigger community than that. So tell us about that.
At the Marvin project, we do have actual residents and businesses that are around where we want to build the project. Again, what did we do? We had a first information meeting with the community, which I think they're so used to being consulted much more advanced in the project that they were happy that we consulted, but a little like, but you're not answering my questions. I'm like, well, because I'm not there yet. I want to include you early on into the conversation, because if I don't include you early on in the conversation, I can't integrate your views into developing in my project. So again, it's all about being proactive in my sense and including them in the decisions, right? Because there's things that will impact them, and I want to see their views and how there's things that I can't change. I can't change the pit of place. It's the pit, but I can, think of other ways of, if there's other infrastructure, could I move it somewhere else where, you know what I mean? And for me, it was important, but it was really interesting because I was trying to do this. We were still in COVID. Well, we are still in COVID, but how do I reach them with and Quebec, we were one of the provinces that had always the biggest restrictions with regards to gatherings. So, but I really, really wanted to have this first information meeting. So we did last September and where we presented where we were, and we were very transparent, and I'm hoping to meet them at least twice again this year. So that's the bit of let's say the residents or the businesses around the Marvin project. Yeah. Talked about First Nations. So we are already having conversations with the First Nations that we think are interested / impacted by the project. So we're having those early on conversations. Again, I think one reaction we got is like, oh, you're still early. I'm like, yes, but I want to start talking to you now. What we did with one of them is we hired one of their contractors also, right? Start building that relationship. So it's all, in my sense, it's all about building relationships and including them in things that make sense to both O3 and to both the First Nations. Then we have our other stakeholders, which is municipal government, provincial government, federal government, where again, we've had really early stage meetings with some of the ministries. And again, in shock, you're already talking to me. And I'm like, yes, I'm already talking to you. And they welcomed it. It's like, oh, I'm not going to get it last minute. Right. So I guess that's part of my strategy with regards to the whole community relations and to go get that social acceptability.
Right. And I guess the audience, we sort of discussed earlier, but we discussed now is, activists, they have their role. They're part of your community. They need to get on board. And I guess that's why I'm interested in this whole conversation, because like I said, you've got one of the more fulsome ESG reports I've read anyway, in terms of, the parts that you need to kind of touch, and the parts that people perhaps don't even understand or know exist. So that's community then, but it's all driven off of the I guess the final pillar here, which is the governance and ethics, right? The board, this is where it starts. These guys need to be on board day one, and they need to drive the agenda. They need to make the money available, and they need this attitude to be all pervasive throughout the organization. So, what was their brief to you?
So our board has a committee that is specific on sustainability, right? On sustainable development, which I report to quarterly. And it was even set up even before I even joined 03, and I set up my whole team. So they do understand the importance of it, and some topics even go beyond that committee to on board level on specific meetings. So I think our board understands that it needs to be done. Even the ECOLOGO, they were all for it. They were all in agreement with it. So I have the backing of the board to put all this in place. It's not a little task.
Well, it's all. But here's what it used to be, right? Here's what it kind of felt like it used to be. It was, oh, there's our ESG person. They're in the back office over there. They come report once a month. And then I had a great conversation with another company who's doing it, I think, as well as you are, certainly as thoroughly as you are, in Papua New Guinea. And they said, oh no, everyone in the company has a job to do on ESG. Every part of their business must be inclusive of the way that they do their business, the way that they manage their teams on a daily basis. And it's that sort of thing, that sort of culture which makes this happen, rather than just be a sort of the last page of the PowerPoint, right?
Oh, but of course, I've given a whole how could I put it? There's so many trainings I gave this past year to all the levels. Like even the board went through a training through the ECOLOGO. Like I had, it had to be done, and it could even be good neighboring, because we were doing a lot of drilling close to residents, and I met everyone. I met all of our employees. I met all our contractors, and I told them why this is important, why this has to be the top priority, right? So if there's anyone at O3 that doesn't understand that ESG is a priority, there's something wrong. They were sleeping. I don't know. There's something wrong. And the board member that we last added, her expertise is communications and community relations. We went to bring that expertise up to the board.
What do they do? I'm intrigued. So how do they engage? Or was it like, you know what I mean? So it's like, right, I'm senior management. Off you go and do it. I mean, what's the reality on the ground?
No, the board members come to site, right. and they come to see, and actually that new board member, I went through the whole projects with her. She asked me questions about what we were doing about the certain issues, and meeting the team on the ground. There
we go. I guess you're saying the whole company understands what we're trying to do and why. So if I said to you, right, this is the important questions, right? Which is, why should investors care whether you deliver a comprehensive ESG package or not? What's the answer to that?
I would go further. Why should investors care that the ESG content is real and transparent? Because there's a lot of ESG content going around that, again, I think we have to do it, so let's do it. I think investors, so if I go back to your first question, in my perspective, projects are not going to go ahead if you're not including this as a base as a pillar of your strategy. Projects are not going to be accepted. Communities, government, everyone's much more informed. It will take more than, oh, I'm creating X amount of jobs. Yes, I'm creating X amount of jobs, but I'm also making sure that I'm building it not to create more problems, not to create problems to the community, not to create problems to the environment, not to, et cetera, et cetera. So I think investors have to look at this and seeing, okay, because there's you talked a bit about the reputation. So yes, there's a reputation, but there's also the fact that, okay, maybe the project's not going to go ahead. So if the project doesn't go ahead, there goes your investment.
Exactly. And that's the kind of thing I try to say to people. We've had some sort of quite juvenile comments around, oh, First Nations, they should be grateful we're giving them jobs, giving them money, right? So why do we need to pander to that? Why do we need to pander to ESG, to funds? It doesn't really matter. We've always done it, right? Climate change, it'll come and go as a narrative. Don't worry about that. Carbon capture or net zero carbon, whatever these other targets are, it kind of doesn't matter. You'd say to those people what?
They'll hit a wall. Eventually, they're going to hit a wall. Maybe I'm going back to my climate change, 20 some odd years. I've seen it all. I've seen the ups and I've seen the downs. What's different now is that consequences are visible now, which 20 years ago weren't visible. The fires, the forest fires, if you look at, California, or even in BC and Canada, or if you look at the flooding, or if you look, we could see it now, right? And if you let's even talk about the S, right? The S is what? Social. What has been going on? There's been, the Black Lives Matters. There's been, there's a whole bunch of social issues also coming. There's, we see it. We see it with the pandemic. So if we're not taking care of this, projects are not going to go ahead.
Simple as that. And that'll hurt your pockets.
Yes.
Right. Myrzah, I think that was fantastic. There's a lot of words used there which that people may not quite understand. I'm going to put a link to your ESG report, 2021 ESG report, in the below the video. Go look at it. It's a really good starter for some of the things that you need to understand, that companies need to understand and start delivering on. Again, we'll probably have an article come out in the next few weeks on the same topic, but this is the way things are going, and whether you're on board or not, if you're an investor, it matters.
It does.